and welcome to another episode of the Preparedness Podcast. My name is Rob Hannes, and I'll be your host. Thank you for downloading and listening. I really do appreciate it. As I mentioned last podcast, we are going to have a Getting Your Spouse Interested in Preparedness show with my wife, Amy. My wife was not a prepper before I met her, and it took a little bit of convincing to get her to come around to seeing things my way. She really isn't still a prepper, but she completely understands the need to be prepared, and so we thought it'd be interesting, if not helpful, to have her come on the show and we can have a kind of a question-answer sort of period of how she views preparedness and how I think some of her perspectives on being prepared and how she looks at some of this stuff might help your spouse become prepared, because basically it doesn't really matter that your spouse is completely into this. They really just need to be supportive and help out when they can. So that's coming up soon. If you want to send me an email at rob@prepcast.info, you can put in the subject spouse show and send us any questions you might have. We'll get to those on the show. Those of you getting the weekly tips, you may have noticed that there was a slight delay in getting the next one. Talked to the email service, and that should be fixed. The only issue is that it's going to delay the rest of them because they're set to go out 1 week apart. But don't worry, they're coming. Okay, I want to mention the forum. I haven't mentioned that in a while. The Preparedness Podcast forum we'll go to the website, and up at the top you'll see forum. There's the links. If you want to type in directly, it's thepreparednesspodcast.com/forum. It's the same forum that was there. It's got all the same great information that was there. It just looks different. So if you were a member, go ahead and try logging on. If not, join us and join us in the conversations. I also want to mention, follow us on Twitter and like us on Facebook. On Twitter, we're Prepcast, and on Facebook, we're just Preparedness Podcast. Coming up not next month, October 6th and 7th, the Arizona Survivalist Prepper Expo will be in Mesa, Arizona. There was one just last week in Tucson, and they're doing this again in October. It's Saturday and Sunday. I've put a link on the site, so if you go on there and type for Mesa, Arizona, or Survivalist Prepper Expo, you'll find it. I am planning to be there, so if you're local or in the area, stop on by. I'm not going to have a booth or anything, but maybe we can meet up. You'll probably see me. I'll have the Preparedness Podcast hat. Hope to have a Preparedness Podcast T-shirt and stuff like that. So if you see me, stop me and say hi. We are very excited to introduce a new sponsor of the website, LPC Survival. They sell the Berkey and the British Berkfield water filters. If you remember from previous podcasts, I'm a huge fan of gravity-fed water filters because, in a survival or emergency situation, who wants to pump filter several times a day just because you're thirsty or need to cook? If you're trying to filter water for your entire family, you're going to be doing nothing but pumping water all day long. If you have a gravity-fed, the gravity does the work for you. Now, we've had a British Berkfield for over 10 years, and because I'm a big fan of testing the preps, recently what we did was my family and I ran a test using the Berkfield for an entire year. Now, we were only using tap water into it, so it wasn't like we were using lake water or something like that, but we wanted to see how well it held up to daily use. We wanted to see what the issues were with using it, and so we did it for an entire year. My kids will not drink tap water here in Phoenix. They call it icky sink water. But they didn't have any problem at all drinking the water that came from the Berkfield. And it was very easy. You basically just pour the water on the top. It filters through the filters into the bottom, and it's got a little spigot that you use to take the water out. We got a lot of compliments on how well it looked. I'm sure you've seen the Berkfields. This is nice. Stainless steel. It looks very shiny, and it's clean looking. And we've, like I said, we used it for a whole year. So our guests drank the same water, and we never once got complaints about having icky sink water being served to them. So if you are looking to buy a gravity drip filter or would like to have a backup, go to the website and click on the LPC Survival banner. One of the things you can check out is the new Go Berkey kit, which is basically a small travel-sized drip filter. It uses one filter element. But they also carry the classic British Berkfield units, which is the one I was just talking about. This is also a good time to let you know that as we bring in advertisers, I want to make sure that my listeners understand that I'm not just advertising anybody. We're going and making sure that we are getting vendors that are basically selling quality products that I really think that you should have. Like, for example, I just got done telling you about LPC Survival, and they have the Berkfield filters. I really strongly believe in having quality water filtration equipment. You need a gravity system. You need a pump system. You need probably some sort of chemical disinfection. You need to be able to boil water. You need all these things. And so as we bring on advertisers, I want you to keep in mind that these are vendors that are selling the products that I really think that you should look at. Okay, the last thing I want to cover before we get into the rest of the podcast is I've received some emails and some comments about people who want either a daily show or multiple shows per week. And I'm not against this at all. It really comes down to really having the time, but I'm going to try to do that. I think this week I'm actually going to try to put out several podcasts. I'm definitely shooting for 2, hoping to get maybe 3. And I'm really just going to see what that's like, how it feels, how easy it is to do. Obviously, they're going to be shorter than 1 podcast per week. Probably shooting between right around 20, maybe to 30 minutes, something like that. Now, this doesn't mean that the information is going to be any different. It's still going to be the same. I'm still shooting for the same quality of information. I'm just trying to do it in smaller bites. I realize that the way I like to listen to podcasts is while I'm doing things around the house or traveling to and from work, stuff like that. And typically the longer podcasts are more difficult to consume. So I thought I'd try this. Give me an email. Send me some feedback through the website. Let me know what you think about the multiple podcasts, and then we'll see where it goes from there. One of the things I wanted to talk about this podcast is a very, very short segment, and that's basically trusting your instincts. A lot of times we'll get the feeling, and if you've learned to listen to your inner gut instinct, so to speak, or your spidey sense or whatever you want to call it, a lot of times it comes down to, gee, I should go left, but I don't feel good about that, so I'm going to go right. In those situations, we rarely, if ever, really know whether we made the right choice. We can only go through life assuming that our sixth sense is guiding us properly. Every once in a while, though, the proof comes home in the pudding, so to speak, and this is what I want to talk about. I'm going to guess that probably at least 5 of my listeners have been affected by this Eclair failure that just happened this week. Now, for those of you who don't know what Eclair are, basically it was an MLM company where you put some money in and you jump through some hoops and you get more money out. A friend of mine had told me about this, and they were really, really excited about it. And about 15 months ago or so. And so they were just like, oh, check this out. Yeah, look what I can do. You put the money in, and then you got to just place 1 ad a week, and then, you make these commissions, and then you can pull this money out, and you're making a lot of money. And to me, it fell in the too good to be true category. I even told him so. I said, you know what, this doesn't sound right. But, he kept, for like 3 months, he kept saying, oh, look, it's great. Look at all the money I put in, and look at all the money I'm making, and blah, blah, blah. So I said, all right, you know what? I'm always in favor of making money. So I said, all right, I'll try. And I tried just a little bit. I put a small amount of money in, and 3 months later, I pulled it out just because that was about as fast as I could do it. So whatever was left in there it wasn't my money. Whether I got it or not didn't matter because it wasn't mine. It was just something to play around and see how it went. Well, long story short, I've been in it and trying this for about a year, and because it wasn't my money, I wasn't worried about it, but there were all these red flags, which is why I took my initial investment out. And Just there's one thing after another. They stopped accepting credit cards. They stopped issuing checks. You had to go through some third-party payment system. And it just seems that the longer the time went on, there was just more of these red flags. And I never really lost the whole feeling that it was too good to be true, but I wanted to see this play out. I just wanted to see what was happening. Well, just a couple days ago, what happened was the SEC shut them down because they were a Ponzi scheme. It turns out, and I actually read the entire SEC complaint, everything about this thing was an absolute fabricated lie. There wasn't one thing true about it. Now, the only reason I'm bringing this up is because I wanted to just illustrate that trusting your instinct is a very important aspect of survival and preparedness. Even if you never have any validation or verification that your decision based on your gut instinct was correct, I think it's still very important to foster that sort of skill to be able to listen to what your senses around you are telling you. And I mean, quite honestly, your sixth sense or your gut instinct is basically your subconscious brain processing all these cues and signals and trying to basically tell you there's something wrong here. So it's a good thing to learn to listen to that. The main topic for this podcast is going to be what to expect in a crisis. Now, these first few shows for the new series, I'm trying to lay down a foundation of information about being prepared. Things like what motivates us, what things we should look for, what we should try to accomplish, because I want to basically start with a good foundation and just take off from there. The reason I want to cover this topic is because you need to take these common things and look at your preparedness plan to make sure that you've covered them, not only from a personal standpoint, but also mentally. You know, you need to be able to handle what you're going to see, what you're going to experience to make sure that you're not frozen in place by what you see. Now, I don't know without going through disaster if that's possible completely, but having a good understanding of what to expect should help you act faster and thus keep yourself as safe as possible. While not every one of these occurs in every disaster, these are things that commonly happen among the major disasters. Now, initially, there could be shaking, a shock wave, a loud boom, blown glass and debris, and falling building structures. But as soon as the initial event is over, you're going to have to deal with these, and I've broken them down to, it was like 5, maybe 6 different areas. The first one I have is environmental. These are the things that are going on around you. Fires. This is a big one. You know, if you're in a tall building or even just your house, you know, something happens, like a gas main blows up or something, you know, you're going to have to contend with fires. Collapsed or damaged buildings. Now, if you're in that building and you survive the initial collapse, you're going to have to, you know, work your way through that debris, or you might have to wait to be rescued. There'll be electrical shorts and gas leaks. Typically, these are what create a lot of the fires. There's going to be smoke and a lot of dust. If you're in a urban environment where you are near or working in tall buildings, when I talked about that EDC bag, having a smoke mask or a dust mask and goggles is probably a really good idea. The communications are going to be overloaded or completely down. Not just your cell phones, but also the emergency services, the radios. There's going to be a lot of traffic in those systems, which are not really used to, 10 times the amount of normal traffic. They tend to get overloaded and become less efficient. Okay, there's going to be a lack of information. Initially, nobody's going to know what happened. You might hear people say the car blew up or the building collapsed or such and such is on fire. That may or may not be true. Hazardous materials, gas, diesel, chemicals, poisonous vapors, you're going to have all these things around. Water will be undrinkable without treatment. And in the longer scenario, water will probably have to be trucked in. The loss of power or intermittent power. In other words, the electricity is not going to be stable and not something you can rely on. This is going to lead to darkness, either after the sun sets or inside a building where there are no windows, like stairwells, possibly if you're in an elevator, or an internal room, like in an office building, something like that. Sewage backs up. Once the power is out, the sewage tends to back up. There's going to be damaged roads and bridges. Bridges will be unsafe to use or simply just not there because they collapse. Also, the damage can be so extensive that visual landmarks no longer exist, and it makes it really hard to get your bearings. So, for example, a lot of these major tornadoes we've seen in the Midwest, they basically flatten everything to a point where you could be standing on your home street corner and not even know that's where you are because there are no visual landmarks that you're used to seeing. Now, this isn't something, I mean, you're not going to expect to find all of these in every disaster. But if you have, let's say, an earthquake, if you have a major earthquake in, say, the southern Illinois, southern Missouri area, or California or Alaska, one of those places like that, you probably will find each and every one of these. If it's a tornado, the bridges might be okay, but these are some of the things you have to look for, some of the things that you have to expect in a major disaster. The next thing I have is human, and this is where it gets rather unpleasant. There's going to be death. Some people will die immediately due to the event, and some people will die from injuries caused by the event. You're going to see dead and injured children. You're going to have smells, blood, urine, feces, open bodies. You hunters know what I'm talking about by open bodies. I don't know, but I hear that humans smell even worse than deer. You're going to see gore. You're going to see sights of bodies in positions and in ways you've never seen before. And, of course, on top of all that, there's going to be very poor sanitation. There's, your body still functions, and there's going to be very few places to relieve yourself. Then we move on to the mental state. Confusion, chaos, and disorganization. It can't be helped. It's very difficult to coordinate any sort of large event in the best of times. It's going to be near impossible to organize any sort of communication, information stream, especially in the beginning when people don't even know what happened, what caused it, what's damaged, and what needs to be done. Now, while some people can panic, it's usually not common. In the worst possible cases of normal disasters, only about 15 to 30% of the people actually show a passive and dazed reaction. However, if the disaster is a terrorist attack, like an NBC attack, that's a nuclear, biological, chemical attack, or a pandemic, or some other event where people realize that it might be an end-of-the-world scenario. Now, they may not use those terms, but when life takes a turn where everything you know is suddenly changed, there is no more stability, there is no more, you can't rely on the power coming on, the water coming on, you don't know anything. Possibly the building that you were just walking to that had all your family just collapsed. I mean, your whole world just falls out from underneath you. People can act irrationally. That doesn't mean that it's always violently, but it's irrationally. For example, of people who, they're trying to clean up, but all they do is they pick up a brick from this pile, they walk 10 feet, and they put the brick in that pile. But then they pick another brick from that pile, and they walk back to the original pile and put it down. They're not accomplishing anything. They are acting irrationally. They've lost that ability to cope. Volunteerism. Many people start rescue operations and clean up fairly rapidly. We band together. We want to help each other. There may be confusion on what needs to be done, but that usually doesn't stop people from trying to get things done. Typically, this is a good thing because anybody who needs to be dug out of debris or rescued or given first aid and stuff, typically there's enough people on hand to try to do that. So people tend to help each other in normal times, and this extends into this disaster period or this post-disaster period. Crime and looting are usually not something that happen unless there are some pre-existing conditions. For example, what happened to Hurricane Katrina. Now, if the disaster is catastrophic, and once people start realizing that things aren't going to go back to normal, that can lead to these irrational and criminal sort of behaviors. And I think it goes without saying there's going to be a lot of stress. There's going to be a lot of rumors about what happened. Maybe a building collapsed and people are saying, ooh, we're under attack, or it's a terrorist attack, and it may be just simply the gas main blew out in the basement. A lot of people are going to lose the ability to cope. Maybe not right away, but it happens fairly often after 10, 12, 15, 24 hours of rescue operations and trying to save people and just seeing these people die and not be able to help them. A lot of people lose the ability to cope with that. The next section I titled Recovery Efforts and Media Attention. The initial information that's put out is usually wrong. In some cases, it's right, but then it changes and then it goes back. It's very difficult to trust any of the initial information that comes out simply because nobody knows enough about what happened. The coordination will be poor. People trying to help will be running around and getting lost. This includes people who are in the event and in the area when it happens. Also, the emergency responders. They're coming in and they may not know what to do, where to go. There's going to be emergency vehicles everywhere, emergency personnel and equipment everywhere. There's lots of official activity, especially not right after a few minutes, but once the response starts to happen, everybody floods into an area. The media will swamp the place. They're going to be everywhere. They're going to be getting in the way. Medical personnel will be overloaded, and if it's a bad enough disaster, they may very well start triaging off patients. Triage means basically you help those that have the greatest likelihood of surviving with some medical treatment, and those that are going to die or they're likely to die anyways, even with medical treatment, typically they leave alone. The police are going to be stretched thin, and criminals know this. So if the disaster took place in a high crime area, you can expect the criminals to take advantage of this. If it's a large event, people may be reluctant to help others, choosing to protect their own families instead. This is for both emergency responders and the police and the people that should be helping out. There is that instinct to protect their family. If it's a long-term disaster, disease, especially those diarrheal diseases, there's outbreaks usually because of the contaminated water, and you're going to see condemned buildings and houses, which leads to, if your house is condemned, they don't allow you to go into it, which means you can't get any of your stuff. All right, the last area I have are the stressing factors. These are the things that make it worse to recover or rescue or get out of the area, or extra things you need to deal with. You're not going to be able to get home quickly, and you might have to walk. Think of the terrorist attack on 9/11. Those people, there are no cabs running, there are no cars running. You had to walk out of there. Children may be stranded, whether because the parents can't get out of the disaster area or because the school or daycare are in the disaster area. That's a huge stress factor for people because they can't get to their children. Crime doesn't happen everywhere, but it does happen some places when a disaster happens. Looting, robbing, theft, worse. Murder and rape is not unusual in some areas. A disaster where the law enforcement can't respond is likely to make that worse for that time being. Roads are either going to be clogged with traffic or they're going to be obstructed with debris and abandoned vehicles, including those emergency responders' vehicles. Supplies are going to be short. Supplies of everything: food, water, batteries, bandages, all that stuff. There's going to be a lack of available fuel. Whatever is in the vehicle and the generators and stuff, that's probably it until somebody realizes that, oops, hey, we're out of fuel. Now we got to go get fuel. Anyone trying to drive through the disaster area, they're going to get flat tires because of the debris. Whether this is the emergency responders trying to get into the area or if you were lucky enough to get to your vehicle and try to drive out of the area, even if it's on the periphery of the disaster area, chances are you're going to get a flat tire, possibly two. Large storage tanks may fail. Water, fuel, oil, and when they do, that just compounds the effect in that area, especially with something that's flammable like fuel. The lack of medical care or transport to medical care. Even if the phones are working, there won't be anyone available to come to your aid or rescue. This is particularly disturbing when you have somebody who's basically dying in your arms and you don't have any supplies and there's nothing you can do for them, but if the paramedics were to get there, they would be able to at least stop the bleeding or control this. You can get through to 911 and basically sorry, we don't have any money to send. There's nobody available. That's a huge stressing factor. Even if it's not anybody you really know, the human spirit is very bonding, and we don't take well to those sort of things. Something I don't think a lot of people think of are the lack of replacement batteries. Unlike the movies, they don't last forever. Every shift on the police department, they charge their batteries. If you have any sort of, everybody has a smartphone. How often do you have to charge your smartphone? Either every day or every other day. Under heavy use, the battery is going to drain a lot faster. Gear gets damaged, lost, or stolen. Now, this may be malicious. This may be just incidental, but it still happens. If suddenly, your pack or your bag or your box of first aid supplies isn't where you left it, or, you turn around and suddenly it's gone, you don't have it. You need to, if you're an emergency responder, you need to take care to make sure to, keep track of your stuff. And if you're just somebody who's trying to get out of the disaster area, make sure you keep track of all your stuff. Not all emergency responders are trained adequately. Not everybody knows what needs to be done. We have lots of people who want to help, they want to try to help, but a lot of times they just haven't had the training yet, or they haven't been trained for this magnitude or level of disaster and emergency care. Everybody's going to try to do the best they can, but the reality is they may not have the training enough to actually either save or rescue or do things properly. Then they could make things worse. And the last thing I have as a stressing factor is that aid and relief do not usually come fast enough. These are the things that we can expect in a crisis, particularly a major disaster. And go over this list and compare it with your preparedness plan and talk about with your group and your family as far as, look, these are the things that we can expect, or some of the things we can expect. We need to know how to handle each of these, what we're going to do, what we shouldn't do, and make sure that you're mentally prepared to handle a crisis. The better prepared, both physically and mentally, you're going to be better able to handle the situation, stay safe, and get home safe and protect your family. Well, that wraps up this podcast. I want to thank you for downloading and taking the time to listen. If you have any questions, please email me at rob@prepcast.info. Be sure to check out the forum and check out the site at thepreparednesspodcast.com. You're going to find a lot of good articles there with information, but I'm also posting a lot of current events and news articles, things that I think that have some relevance to being prepared and staying on top of things. Remember, you can follow us at Twitter at Prepcast and on Facebook at Preparedness Podcast. I want to thank our website sponsor, LPC Survival. Until next time, folks, enjoy life and stay safe.